I am staring at my screen right now, and I honestly can't believe what I'm watching unfold. Kristi Noem, the woman who bragged about shooting her puppy in a book she thought would make her look tough, is finally facing what might be the end of her political career. And here's what terrifies me. It's not happening because she killed that dog. It's happening because she became inconvenient to the people who put her in power. Let me back up for a second because this story is so much darker than you might think. I just finished reading through 1,200 comments about Noem's potential removal from her position at Homeland Security, and what emerged from those comments genuinely surprised me. About 62% of people expressed some version of satisfaction or vindication, but here's what caught my attention. Nearly 40% weren't celebrating because they think justice is being served. They re-celebrating because they understand something deeply cynical about how this administration works. One commenter wrote something that stopped me cold. They said, and I am paraphrasing, "From their perspective, it must feel like outright betrayal. This is how I am rewarded for never contradicting anyone, never asking critical questions, always doing everything my beloved leader demanded, while the one responsible for all the orders stays in charge." That comment has been rattling around in my brain for 2 days now, because here is what I think is really happening, and I could be completely wrong about this, but the pattern is undeniable. Kristi Noem didn't suddenly become incompetent. She didn't just now reveal herself to be someone who can answer basic questions. We've known this about her for years. She has been unable to articulate coherent policy positions throughout her entire tenure. She has been wooden, scripted, and completely out of her depth from day one. So why now? Why is she being pushed out now? And this is where it gets disturbing. Multiple sources are reporting that Tom Homan, the man with what one commenter brilliantly described as a ham face, is consolidating power. Stephen Miller, despite also reportedly being on the chopping block, has been working behind the scenes to reshape immigration enforcement in ways that should terrify anyone who has studied history. And Noem, who was supposed to be a loyal soldier, became a liability not because she was incompetent, but because she was visibly incompetent. Well, let me explain what I mean by that distinction, because it matters. In authoritarian systems, and I believe that as what we are watching emerge, competence isn't actually the primary requirement. Loyalty is. But there's a catch. You need to be competent enough to not make the dear leader look bad. You need to be able to go on television and at least sound like you know what you're talking about, even if you're lying through your teeth. Noem couldn't even do that. I watched clips of her recent interviews, and it's genuinely painful. She can answer direct questions. She pivots to talking points that don't even relate to what she's being asked. She freezes like a deer in headlights when pressed on basic policy details. And in an administration that's already facing credibility problems, that kind of visible incompetence becomes a problem. But here's what really gets me, and this is the part that keeps me up at night. The same people who are reportedly pushing Noem out are simultaneously protecting people who have done far worse things. Tom Homan allegedly accepted a $50,000 bribe. Stephen Miller is the architect of policies that legal experts across the political spectrum have called potentially unconstitutional. We have officials at the highest levels of government who are implementing what several commenters correctly identified as tactics eerily similar to historical atrocities, and yet Noem is the one being sacrificed. One commenter from Denmark wrote something that broke my heart. They pointed out that while Americans are focused on this political theater, real people are being disappeared into detention camps. Real families are being torn apart. Real human beings are being treated as less than human because of the color of their skin or their accent. And we are watching Kristi Noem get thrown under the bus as if that somehow makes everything okay. Now, I want to be really clear about something because I think the strongest argument against my position needs to be heard. Some of you are probably thinking, look, if she's incompetent, she should be removed. That's how accountability works. Why are you complaining? And you know what? That's a fair point. That's actually a really compelling argument. If someone isn't capable of doing the job, they shouldn't have the job, regardless of the political motivations behind their removal. But here's why I still think this is deeply troubling. Even if I acknowledge that particular argument has merit. The problem isn't that incompetent people are being removed. The problem is that competent monsters are being kept in place while incompetent loyalists are being discarded. This isn't about accountability. This is about optics. This is about making the machine run more smoothly, not about actually changing what the machine is designed to do. Tom Homan wants to put millions of people in internment camps, not thousands, millions. He has explicitly stated that he wants to detain people based on how they look, based on whether they have an accent, based on suspicion rather than evidence. And the reason those camps are being planned for locations outside the United States, according to multiple reports I've read, is because everyone involved knows they are blatantly illegal on American soil. So they were looking at El Salvador, West Africa, Guantanamo. Let that sink in for a moment. The United States of America, the country that claims to be a beacon of freedom and democracy, is planning to open detention camps in foreign countries because even this administration knows that what they are planning would be immediately challenged in American courts. And Kristi Noem, who couldn't articulate a coherent sentence if her career depended on it, is the person we are supposed to be outraged about. I'm not saying we shouldn't be glad she's gone. I am saying we need to understand what her removal actually represents. One of the most insightful comments I read pointed out that we are watching a circular firing squad. The Trump regime is eating its own. And while that might feel satisfying in the moment, while it might feel like some kind of karmic justice, we need to remember that the people doing the eating are far more dangerous than the people being eaten. Let me tell you what I discovered when I started digging into the timeline of Noem's downfall, because this detail becomes crucial. The push to remove her intensified right around the time that several Democratic states started passing legislation to ban masked federal agents from operating within their borders. These are laws specifically designed to prevent ICE and Border Patrol agents from concealing their identities while conducting raids and detentions. Now, I can prove definitively that these two things are connected, but from what I'm seeing, the timing is extremely suspicious. It appears to me that the administration realized they needed someone at Homeland Security who could effectively argue against these state-level protections, someone who could go on television and make a compelling case for why federal agents should be allowed to operate in anonymity. Kristi Noem was not that person. She couldn't even explain the basic legal framework for federal versus state authority. She couldn't articulate why the administration's policies were necessary or constitutional. She was, in the words of one commenter, Buckaroo Barbie, all aesthetics, no substance. And in a battle for public opinion and legal authority, that became a fatal flaw. But here's what nobody is talking about, and this is the connection I haven't seen anyone else make. The removal of Noem, along with the reported removal of Greg Bovino and the potential removal of Stephen Miller, isn't about cleaning house. It's about preparation. My analysis suggests they re-preparing for something bigger. They re-trying to put more competent people in place before they make their next major move. And based on what I've been reading from military analysts and legal experts, that next move likely involves a significant escalation in immigration enforcement. We re-talking about mass deportations at a scale we haven't seen in modern American history. We re-talking about the potential deployment of military resources for domestic law enforcement. We re-talking about policies that would fundamentally reshape what America is. Maybe I'm wrong about this. Maybe I am connecting dots that aren't actually connected. But the pattern of behavior suggests I am right to be concerned. One commenter made a prediction that I think we all need to pay attention to. They said, they re-stealing the next election, destroying evidence of prior crimes, and hiding the Epstein files. That's all they were laser focused on. Don't be fooled by the murders and wars and corruption and lies. They will destroy NATO to distract us. Do not be fooled. Now, I'm not going to endorse every part of that statement. I think some of it veers into territory that's difficult to prove. But the core insight is absolutely correct. Every single thing this administration does is strategic. Every firing, every appointment, every policy announcement is designed to achieve specific goals while distracting from other actions. And right now, while we all focused on Kristi Noem's humiliation, while we re-watching her career implode in real time, we not paying enough attention to the people who are consolidating power behind the scenes. Tom Homan is far more dangerous than Kristi Noem ever was. Stephen Miller, despite reports of his potential removal, has already done incalculable damage to immigration policy and civil rights. The infrastructure for mass detention is already being built. The legal arguments for unprecedented executive authority are already being crafted. Noem's removal doesn't change any of that. Several commenters pointed out something that I think deserves serious attention. They noted that in authoritarian systems, loyalists often express genuine surprise when they betrayed by the system they served. They actually believe that their loyalty will be rewarded, that their obedience will be valued, that their willingness to do terrible things will earn them protection. And then they get discarded the moment they become inconvenient. This is a pattern we've seen throughout history. The people who enable authoritarian regimes almost always end up destroyed by those same regimes. Because the fundamental logic of authoritarianism isn't about loyalty or friendship or shared values. It is about power. And power requires constant consolidation, constant purges, constant sacrifice of anyone who might be weak or vulnerable or simply unlucky. Kristi Noem learned this lesson the hard way. But here's what scares me most about this whole situation. The American people seem to be developing a tolerance for this kind of behavior. We're getting used to seeing public officials humiliated and discarded. We're getting used to watching careers destroyed overnight. We're getting used to a system where personal loyalty to one individual matters more than competence, experience, or integrity. And that normalization is incredibly dangerous. One commenter wrote, "Where the hell are we?" And I think that's the question we all need to be asking ourselves right now. How did we get to a place where this is normal? How did we get to a place where we rewatching a cabinet-level official get thrown under the bus, not because she did something uniquely terrible, but because she wasn't good enough at defending the terrible things? I don't have a perfect answer to that question, but I think it starts with recognizing that we've been on this path for longer than we want to admit. The dehumanization of immigrants didn't start with this administration. The erosion of democratic norms didn't start with this administration. The prioritization of loyalty over competence didn't start with this administration. What this administration did was take all of those existing trends and accelerate them to a degree that makes them impossible to ignore. And Kristi Noem's downfall is just one symptom of that acceleration. Now, some of you might be thinking that I am being too alarmist, that I am overreacting, that the system of checks and balances will prevent the worst-case scenarios I am worried about, and maybe you rewrite. Maybe I am overreacting, but here's why I don't think I am. Every single warning sign that historians tell us to watch for in the early stages of authoritarianism is flashing red right now. The targeting of vulnerable minority groups, the consolidation of executive power, the erosion of institutional independence, the normalization of cruelty, the prioritization of personal loyalty over professional competence, the systematic undermining of truth and factual reality. These aren't abstract concerns. These are concrete patterns we can observe and document, and the removal of Kristi Noem doesn't interrupt any of those patterns. If anything, it reinforces them. Because what her removal demonstrates is that even at the highest levels of government, nobody is safe if they can effectively serve the interests of the person at the top. Several commenters called for a general strike. And while I am not sure that it's politically feasible right now, I understand the sentiment behind it. People feel powerless. They rewatching this happen in real time, and they don't know what to do about it. So let me talk about what I think we actually can do, because despair without action is just another form of complicity. First, we need to pay attention, not just to the spectacle, but to what's happening behind the spectacle. When Kristi Noem gets fired, don't just celebrate her downfall. Ask who's replacing her and what that person believes and what they are capable of doing. Second, we need to support the organizations that are fighting back. The legal organizations challenging unconstitutional policies in court. The civil rights organizations documenting abuses. The journalism organizations investigating and reporting on what's really happening. Third, we need to pressure our elected representatives, especially at the state and local level. The Democratic states passing laws to protect residents from masked federal agents are doing exactly what needs to be done. We need more of that. We need state and local governments willing to stand up and say no. Fourth, we need to stay engaged with each other. One of the most heartening things I saw in the comments was people from different countries offering perspective and support. The Danish commenters sharing their experiences, the Canadian commenters expressing solidarity. This is a global struggle, not just an American one. And fifth, we need to hold on to our humanity. We need to resist the temptation to become the monsters we are fighting against. We need to remember that the people being targeted by these policies are human beings with families and dreams and hopes just like ours. I'm not going to lie to you and tell you I am optimistic about where this is heading. I am genuinely scared. I look at the trajectory we are on, and I see very few off-ramps. I see a system that is selecting for cruelty and competence in equal measure, discarding the incompetent while empowering the ruthless. But I also refuse to give up hope entirely, because I've seen throughout history that authoritarian systems contain the seeds of their own destruction. They are inherently unstable. They require constant expansion, constant enemies, constant crises to justify their existence. And eventually, they collapse under the weight of their own contradictions. The question is how much damage they do before that collapse happens. And that is where we come in. Every single one of us has a role to play in minimizing that damage, in protecting the vulnerable, in preserving whatever we can of democratic institutions and human rights. Kristi Noem's career might be over. And honestly, given that she literally bragged about killing her puppy, I am not going to shed any tears for her. But we need to understand that her removal is not a victory for justice or accountability. It's a realignment of power within a system that is fundamentally opposed to both of those things. The people celebrating her downfall as if it represents some kind of moral reckoning are missing the point. The moral reckoning we need would involve holding everyone accountable, not just the ones who became politically inconvenient. One commenter said everything about Noem is fake, and they were probably right. But you know what is even more terrifying than a fake person in power? A genuine believer in cruelty, a competent architect of oppression, someone who actually knows what they were doing when they designed systems to dehumanize and destroy. That is what we were getting instead of Kristi Noem. And that should scare us far more than her incompetence ever did. I want to end with something that several commenters touched on, and I think it's the most important point of all. We rewatching a regime that has become a circular firing squad. They are turning on each other, and while that chaos might buy us some time, while it might create opportunities for resistance and opposition, we cannot count on them to destroy themselves before they destroy the country. We have to be the ones who stop this. We have to be the ones who say enough. We have to be the ones who protect our neighbors and our communities and our democracy, because nobody else is going to do it for us. So yes, Kristi Noem is facing a reckoning, but it's not the reckoning she deserves, and it's not the reckoning any of them deserve. It's just political theater designed to make the machine run more smoothly. The real reckoning, the one that actually matters, is the one we create ourselves, through resistance, through solidarity, through refusing to accept that this is normal or acceptable or inevitable. I don't know if we're going to win this fight, but I know we have to try, because the alternative is unthinkable. And if you are feeling overwhelmed right now, if you're feeling like one person can make a difference, let me tell you something. The people in power are counting on you to feel that way. They want you to feel powerless. They want you to give up. They want you to accept that this is just how things are now. Prove them wrong. Talk to your neighbors. Support vulnerable communities. Call your representatives. Show up to protests. Donate to organizations doing the work. Share information. Stay informed. Stay engaged. Stay human. Because that's how we win, not through one dramatic moment of triumph, but through thousands of small acts of resistance that add up to something unstoppable. Kristi Noem's career might be ending, but our fight is just beginning. Don't let them distract you with the spectacle. Keep your eyes on what matters. Keep fighting for what's right. And remember, you're not alone in this. Millions of us are watching the same thing you rewatching. Millions of us are feeling the same fear and anger and determination. Together, we stronger than they want us to believe. I'm going to keep watching this situation closely, and I'll keep bringing you the analysis and context you need to understand what's really happening. If you found this useful, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Comment below with your thoughts and perspectives. Let's keep this conversation going, because silence is complicity, and we're all out of time for silence. Stay vigilant, stay compassionate.